At the time, I was an investigator with the Iowa Police Department, and this was the case that would change my entire career. I had seen killers before. I had caught criminals. But what I witnessed in Villisca, it defied human comprehension. It was the morning of June 10th, 1912. The town of Villisca was small, quiet, picturesque, birds chirping, shops opening. Then, around 8 a.m., a woman ran into the station, Mary Peckham, a neighbor of the Moore family. Her face was pale with terror. "Mr. Whitmore, something's terribly wrong. Nobody's awake at the Moore house. The door is locked from inside, and even the chickens are caged strangely," she said. Officer Horton and I rushed to the scene. The door was indeed locked from the inside, though one window was slightly open. I reached for the latch and opened it. Stepping inside felt like the air itself had been sucked out of the room. The silence was suffocating, thick, as if the walls themselves had stopped breathing. We moved through the drawing room and straight toward the bedrooms. I opened the door slowly, and my heart froze. 4 bodies lay on the beds: Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 2 children. Their faces were covered with cloth. Blood splattered the walls like someone had unleashed a rage upon them. An axe lay beside the bed, clean, yet a few drops still clung to the blade, trembling as if the violence hadn't fully settled. I stepped back, closing the door. "Upstairs?" Horton asked, voice tight. I nodded. "Let's see." Upstairs, 2 visiting children, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were found similarly slain. Lena's arms were stretched under the bed as if she had tried to escape. Her face held that final, frozen expression of fear, a fear I have never forgotten. Throughout the investigation, one thing struck me cold. The killer had not acted in haste. Everything was deliberate, calm. Mirrors were covered, food had been eaten, a lamp had been lit and then extinguished, and the door locked from the inside. This was no lunatic acting on impulse. It was someone performing a ritual, following a pattern. Strange occurrences during the investigation. In the days that followed, as we collected evidence, strange things emerged. The kitchen clock had stopped at exactly 12:45, likely the time of the first strike. Cigarette butts littered the floors. The killer had spent hours inside after the murders, smoking. Locals reported seeing a tall figure carrying a bag near the house at night, vanishing into the darkness. I took dozens of statements from townsfolk, yet each one stopped mid-sentence, as though they feared finishing the truth. By the 3rd day, when the forensic team arrived, the house had changed. One man fainted immediately upon entering. He whispered, "I felt a hand on my shoulder, telling me to leave." We wrote it off as stress until that night, when I returned alone. The voice came again, clear, chilling. "Leave, now." I switched on my torch. No one was there, but in the corner of the room a shadow remained, unmoving despite the lamp's glow. I lowered my torch, still there. We worked for months. Suspects were questioned, some even confessed, only to have their statements proven false. Ultimately, the case was closed. No evidence, no suspect, no justice. But the people of Villisca knew better. The house was no longer just a house. At night, the soft scraping of an axe could be heard. Sometimes the laughter of a child, sometimes the scream of a woman. One night, a boy sneaked inside. He claimed he saw a pale, misty woman standing by the bed upstairs. The next day he was found burning with fever. All he could say, "They're still there." I retired from the police in 1948, but my diary holds every note, every observation. Even now, reading those pages makes my hands shake. I've seen thousands of cases, but Villisca was the one place where time seemed to stand still, where the killer didn't leave, where he seemed frozen in that house. In my final entry, I wrote, "The house on 508 East 2nd Street breathes. It remembers everything, and every night, it waits for the next knock." The house still stands in Villisca. People brave enough to stay overnight report hearing the dragging of an axe. Some hear the laughter of a little girl. Some never return. I am old now, but when I hear the name, Villisca Axe Murders, that same silence returns within me. Because I know, it wasn't just human. It was something else. Something that survives on fear. My name is Peggy Hodgson, and I never believed in ghosts. Not until that year. I was just an ordinary mother, raising my kids, worrying about bills, school, and keeping the house running. Our home was small, noisy, but full of laughter. I never imagined that one day, the same house would become one of the most terrifying places in the world. But it did. And that night, the one that changed everything, I still remember it like it happened yesterday. The first night, the sound that broke the silence. It was an ordinary September night in 1977. My daughters, Janet, 11, and Margaret, 13, were upstairs in their room. I was downstairs folding laundry, half tired, half lost in thought. Then suddenly, I heard it. A heavy thud, like something big had fallen to the floor upstairs. I froze. "Janet!" What was that noise? No answer. I climbed the stairs and opened their bedroom door. Both girls were sitting on their beds, wide-eyed, pale. Janet whispering, "Mom." The bed was shaking. By itself, I, laughed nervously. "Oh, sweetheart, it's just the lorry passing outside." The ground trembles sometimes. I pressed my hand on the bed, still, perfectly still. I turned off the light and went downstairs again. But the next night, it happened again, only louder. The second night. This time the bedroom door slammed shut, on its own. I rushed up, heart pounding, flung it open. No one was there. The dresser handles began to rattle, one by one, as if someone invisible was searching inside. Then, 3 slow knocks came from the wall. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I grabbed the girls and brought them downstairs. I tried to convince myself it was all in our heads, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something had entered our home. The police arrived. 2 days later, things got worse. Chairs began moving on their own. Toys flew off the floor. And at night, I could hear footsteps running across the ceiling. That's when I called the neighbors, and finally, the police. A female officer, Constable Caroline Heaps, arrived. I, pleading, said, "Please, ma'am, there's something moving in this house." She smiled, half amused. "Cuckles. Good heavens, Mrs. Hodgson. Ghosts?" But just moments later, she saw it herself. A chair in the living room slid 2 feet across the floor. By itself, no one near it. Her face went white. Later, she wrote in her report, "I saw the chair move. There was no one near it." The police left soon after. But from that night onward, everyone in Enfield knew there was something inside our house. Janet's change. A few days later, my daughter Janet began acting strange. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, talking to the wall, sometimes whispering, sometimes arguing. Then one night, I heard it. A deep, raspy voice from her room. "Get out. This is my house." It wasn't Janet's voice, it was a man's. I ran to her room. Janet was on her bed, eyes closed. But that voice kept coming out of her mouth. I shouted, "Janet, wake up!" She opened her eyes slowly and stared right into mine. "He doesn't like you here." Her skin was cold as ice. I held her tight, sobbing. But whatever looked back at me from those eyes wasn't my little girl. The investigators. News spread quickly. Soon, reporters from the Daily Mirror showed up, cameras flashing, notepads ready. They weren't alone. A man named Maurice Gross, a researcher from the Society for Psychical Research, came with them. He sat with Janet and, asked gently, "Do you know who you've been speaking to, Janet?" She smiled faintly. "He's an old man. His name is Bill." I froze. We had never known any Bill. Maurice began digging through records and found something chilling. A man named Bill Wilkins had lived in our house years ago. He had died there, in the living room chair. When Janet was later hypnotized, She said in that same deep voice, "I died in that chair. I went blind before I died." Those exact words matched a statement from Bill Wilkins' own son. How could Janet have known that? I didn't have an answer. No one did. The night that never ended. Time passed, but the house became a nightmare. Objects flew through the air. Doors slammed on their own. And sometimes, Janet would float. Yes, float. I saw it with my own eyes. She rose 3 feet above her bed, like invisible hands were pulling her up by strings. I screamed. Neighbors rushed in. They saw it too. Her hair standing straight up, her body suspended midair. I grabbed the cross from the wall and shouted, "Leave my child alone!" At that very moment, all the lights went out. A deafening crash echoed through the house. And then, silence. We thought it was over. We hoped it was over. But the next morning, when I opened Janet's bedroom door, there, written on the wall, in something that looked like blood, were the words, "I'm still here." Ed and Lorraine Warren arrive. Not long after, 2 investigators from America came. Ed and Lorraine Warren, people who had seen things beyond imagination. They stood in our living room, silent for a long moment. Then Lorraine whispered, "There's something dark here. It feeds on fear." They prayed throughout the house, sprinkling holy water, and finally told me, "It hasn't left completely. It's weaker, but it's not gone." I asked, terrified, "Can it come back?" Ed looked straight into my eyes. "If you believe it's gone, it will be. But if you fear it, it never left." I couldn't speak. I just held Janet's hand and cried. Years later, Janet slowly began to recover. We left that house eventually, but strangely, no one who moved in afterwards stayed for long. Some said the upstairs window would slam shut by itself at night. Others heard a child, laughing, or saw an old man sitting quietly by the window. I live in another part of London now, but sometimes when the wind blows hard, or a door shuts suddenly, my heart still stops for a moment, because I know that house is still alive, and maybe Bill Wilkins is too. Even when it ended, it never really ended. In the year 2000, a documentary was released, with the original tapes of Janet's voice. That same deep growl, "My name is Bill Wilkins." When I heard it again after all those years, my whole body went cold. The media still says it was all a hoax. They claim Janet was just pretending. But I know the truth. No mother would ever let her child suffer like that if it wasn't real. Even now, before I sleep, I whisper a prayer. God, keep my children safe and keep the past buried. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, through the darkness and silence, I still hear that voice, growling, "Get out! This is my house." The Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most documented hauntings in paranormal history, with police reports, recordings, and dozens of witnesses. But for me, it wasn't a case, it was my life, and a reminder that some spirits never really leave. This isn't just another ghost story. It's a true account, drawn from the personal diary of John Bell, a man who lived through something so terrifying, it became one of America's most chilling hauntings. The Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee. I've seen strange things in my life, but what I experienced in the hills of Tennessee was far beyond imagination, beyond anything the human mind could calmly explain. Everything began in 1817, when whispers spread through the small town of Adams. People spoke about the Bell family and the strange happenings inside their farmhouse, things that only belonged in nightmares. At first, the signs were small, doors creaking open on their own, windows rattling late at night, and dark shapes moving across the walls when no light was near. I thought maybe the villagers were exaggerating, but when I visited the Bell home myself, I realized they weren't lying. That night, the house was dimly lit by old candle holders. As I sat quietly in the parlor, I saw the door of the guest room slowly swing open on its own. A faint shadow slipped out and vanished down the hall. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Suddenly, A cold breath brushed across my face. It felt like invisible fingers tracing my skin. I froze. John Bell looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "It wants to destroy us, Samuel, and it won't stop." At first I didn't believe him, but each passing day, things grew worse. One night I stayed in the house to observe. Betsy, John's young daughter, was asleep in her bed. Then she screamed. A red mark appeared on her arm, a scratch deep and fresh. I asked, "How did this happen?" She sobbed, "I don't know. It touches us. It wants to hurt us." I placed my hand on John's shoulder. In his trembling eyes, I saw a fear that only comes when a man feels death closing in. Then I heard it, a whisper, right next to my ear. "John, we are coming for you." This wasn't just haunting, it was war. Plates moved on their own, chairs dragged across the floor, dark shapes crawled across the walls like living shadows. John Bell muttered, "It's watching me." Every hour, every breath, and I could feel it too. A presence, an unseen energy that wrapped around the house like a cold fog. As the months passed, John Bell's health declined rapidly. Bruises and scratches covered his skin. He said he never felt them happen. They just appeared overnight. Betsy stopped sleeping. The younger children wouldn't enter certain rooms. They said something stood above their beds, breathing, watching, waiting. Villagers asked me, concerned, "Is it true? Is something really inside that house?" I told them, "Yes, I've seen it. And what John Bell wrote in his diary, every word is true." One day I decided to visit the Bell Witch Cave, a few miles from the Bell property. Locals said the cave was where the entity gained its strength. I entered at dusk, carrying a single lantern. The air inside was icy cold, far colder than the world outside. As I stepped deeper in, I heard footsteps echo behind me, slow, heavy, human. I turned, but no one was there. The flame of my lantern flickered, and I heard a whisper, "Leave, or stay forever." My heart pounded as I rushed out of the cave, feeling that same freezing breath chase me all the way to the exit. In John Bell's diary, one entry still haunts me. He wrote, "Every scratch, every bruise, every whisper is her mark." We live in fear, but this record must remain, so the world will know what we faced. John Bell's death. In 1819, John Bell suddenly fell gravely ill. The attacks increased. The whispers became screams. His face grew pale, his hands trembling constantly. The bruises deepened, as if unseen hands were tightening around his throat every night. Then, one morning, he was gone. Betsy screamed. The children wept, and from the dark corner of the room came a laugh, a woman's cold, mocking laugh. The entity had won. Even after John's death, the Bell family remained haunted, as if the evil refused to let go. 2 centuries have passed, and yet the Bell Witch Cave still stands. I visited it again, recently. Locals told me that even now, at night, you can hear whispers, footsteps, and soft humming that fades into the wind. I stepped inside once more. The same chill, the same heavy air, and for a moment, I felt like someone was standing right behind me. The story isn't over. It never was. Because fear, real fear, doesn't die. It lingers, it waits, and it remembers. John Bell's final entry reads, "I know now that she isn't just a spirit. She's a force, born of anger, feeding on fear. Every night when the world sleeps, she comes. She touches us. She tries to kill us. I only hope this diary reaches someone who can understand the truth. This is not a story. This is real." Long pause. I'm still here. And that is the story of the Bell Witch haunting. One of the most terrifying and documented hauntings in American history. The cave still stands. The legend still breathes. And somewhere in the darkness of Adams, Tennessee, she still whispers.